Good morning, ladies and gents. It is 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm sorry I've been so quiet recently. I've not been too well. I had a few issues going on. But everything is hopefully on the mend now. And I've just finished the last bits of filming for my Jack the Ripper tour, which will be over 3 nights. And I'll be able to take you to the location of each murder, but where we are just looking at now through there is, or was, one of the locations. But just a little hello really, check on everyone, and I'll give you a little walk through of Spitalfields market and a little bit of Christmas. Truth to be told, I haven't much felt in the mood for Christmas this year, but this must be rectified. I do not wish to become one of those sour old men. And we get to walk around Spitalfields market when it's totally deserted, before all the morning traders started. And what I love is we're literally walking in the footsteps of history here, from 1887 right to this current day. There has been market trading on this spot, and right from before that as well, because the spot we just looked at, that I pointed out to you and said was one of the murder locations, in Roman times a young woman known as Spitalfields Lady was buried in that point. This brings back memories as well. When I was a young man, or younger anyway, I used to sell antiques. And this is where, or one of the places where London Luke came to buy those antiques. Very early on a Sunday morning. Loved it. And it goes on further around that way. And what is the Corporation of London? London Fruit Exchange and Wool Exchange, the Corporation of London, in the world of 1888, was the site of the last canonical murder. And you've got a nice Christmas tree in there, or a couple actually. I'm going to walk us down the side of Brushfield Street, and we're looking at right at Christchurch, Spitalfields. And I'm going to take you down past some very iconic places which you've probably seen by day if you've been following my Jack the Ripper series. But I do like to give daytime and nighttime aspects of places, particularly where we're going. This is the very famous and iconic 10 Bells pub. If you follow my 3-night series, the Jack the Ripper tour, you'll get a glimpse of inside there through the windows, and we cover our last canonical murder through this. And where we're walking down now is the historic Fournier Street, built in the 18th century for French Huguenot silk weavers. And this is one of those places in London that has changed so little over the years. See what I mean about the old houses and with their original window shutters and things like that. This has got to be one of my favourite streets. Through there is the crypt, which offers a warm zone kind of thing for people nowadays, which is nice. Wilk Street, that's another historic one. You'll see that plays a pretty good role in our night 2, yeah. Night 1 or night 2? No, I think it's night 1. Could be wrong. Love places like Fournier Street. Think of all the history this has seen. From French Huguenot silk weavers in the 18th century to doss houses and prostitutes in the 19th century to the re-gentrification in our era. S. Schwartz. The moon above us, nice to see. And to end us off on this little tour, which was only a quick one really, I'll take us to probably one of London's, or East London's, most famous locations, which also in the Ripper series, like the lives of the ladies, particularly Elizabeth Stride, although I haven't walked down it and shown it in my series because I've tried to stick to the locations of the murders, and there was a lot to cover anyway. But Elizabeth Stride, she would perform cleaning duties and things for that, and like that for the Jews that lived in Brick Lane, where we are now. And this is the iconic Brick Lane, home to the Brick Lane Bagel Bar, very famous. And looking back down Fournier Street, and you'll get a couple of historic images to end this one off, and I hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and if my Jack the Ripper series is going to be your thing, watch out for that, because it'll be hitting the page very soon. So it's a hello from me. Sorry I've been so quiet. Wishing you all a very, very Merry Christmas, and a much happier, brighter 2025 for everyone. Take care all, and I'll see you all in the next one. And before we get into our historical images of the area we've covered, and a little history on East End Christmas, some photos I've taken in nighttime mode. They come out much better like that. Now, when I stood over at Spitalfields Market and pointed over to the area and said to you, this is the site of the 5th Jack the Ripper canonical murder, and said there's a couple of Christmas trees in there, these are those trees. After I'd finished filming, I went back round and took the pictures in nighttime mode, and I wanted to keep the two genres as separate as possible, so why you're seeing photo. Christchurch, Spitalfields in nighttime mode, early in the morning. The iconic 10 Bells pub, and that's all tarted up for Christmas as well, and Fournier Street to its left. And for our historic images, where we began, the Spitalfields Market. Here you see it back in the early 20th century when it was still of its original purpose then as a fruit and vegetable market. And a view along Commercial Street. Spitalfields Market is on the left in the background, and over to the right, marked with the arrow, is the 10 Bells and Fournier Street. And just before the Spitalfields Market, you can see the lost pub and things that are no longer there. And Fournier Street itself in 1896, a cracking shot here because we get Christchurch, Spitalfields in this one, and Fournier Street, a couple of horses and carts, and a moneylender. And you can well imagine, particularly around Christmas time, that many a desperate East Londoner would have gone there. The Provident loan of their day. 1913 for this image. This one's undated, but there is a car right in the background, so it's of, say, 50s onwards era by the look of the car. And our last little cracking shot of Fournier Street. And Brick Lane in 1900. You can well imagine that busy and bustling at Christmas time. And a little history of Christmas. The first commercially available Christmas card was commissioned by Sir Henry Cole and designed by John Callcott Halsey in London in 1843, and Queen Victoria was the person who sent the first official Christmas card, which you see here. The central picture showed 3 generations of a family raising a toast to the card's recipient. On either side were scenes of charity, with food and clothing being given to the poor. And when we think of a Victorian Christmas, in our minds and era that we live in now, this is pretty much what we think of and imagine. A nice, cosy, Dickensian, Mr. Pickwick kind of type Christmas. And for many in the Victorian era, it would have been like that. But for many in the East End, the reality was often very different. And this is an image. They dined off a twopenny loaf and a pennyworth of milk by George John Pinwell, 1866, and depicts the scene from a crust on Christmas Day. And here, halfpenny dinners for the poor children in East London, and this was a particular thing that they did, particularly around Christmas and on Christmas Day, so that the poor kids even had at least a decent meal on Christmas Day. A lot of different organisations of many different faiths and creeds and whatnot, particularly in Spitalfields, because it had a high Jewish population as well. First it started off with French Huguenots, then Jewish people, and a mixture of all sorts, really. And here we see the Christmas tree in the children's ward at the London Hospital in Whitechapel. And the London Hospital, of course, is just a fairly short walk away from where we were in Spitalfields. And here, the London poor at their Christmas marketing. You can see a East End London Christmas market here. And of course their Christmases, for a lot of them, would have been austere. But there would have been elements of light and joy amongst that. And a big thing in the Victorian era that we don't really get that much now were the street entertainers. They were everywhere, particularly at Christmas. So the Victorian East End Christmas would have been a very noisy, colourful and smelly, sometimes some good smells, sometimes some bad, and entertaining at times. Christmas, when you get things like this, the street entertainers, and Christmas carolers, of course, because a lot of poor people, if they had a voice, would go out and sing and earn a few bob by singing Christmas carols. And here we see Christmas shopping in the East End of London. And today we cook our Christmas dinners at home, but for many in the East End of London, particularly in the early to mid-Victorian era, that wasn't a possibility. The small ranges that they had in their home would not have had the capacity to cook the famous goose that most people that could afford it in those days ate. The turkey would come in a little bit later and would be for the wealthier classes, but for the working classes that could afford it, their Christmas dinner consisted of a goose. And you would get your goose, you'd buy it, and you would take it to the baker's and you'd have it baked and you'd go and collect it and bring it home. Very similar to what we see in Scrooge. It was done, it's how it was done. Same as when you had a pie, you'd go and have that baked in the baker's. Poke it and mark it and prick it with D, so you knew who it was. And we end where we began, with the Aldgate Square Christmas tree. And many people think that Prince Albert and Queen Victoria introduced the Christmas tree into England, and in a big way they did. They got it going as we know it. But the first actual person to introduce Christmas trees into the UK was the consort of King George III, Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. And she was the first person to bring in small Christmas trees, which, like in the time of Queen Victoria in her term, were described as a German toy. And that's our very East End Christmas. Hope you all enjoyed, and wishing you all a happy one.